A quick new idea daily from the world's greatest TEDx talks. I'm your host, Atossa Leoni, and this is TEDx Shorts. Of the many racist tropes embedded into American culture, the minstrel show and blackface have left a painful archive of stereotyping and discrimination in the United States. So why is it still adopted as a form of costuming and entertainment? Dwan Reece is the curator of music and performing arts at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. Today, she asked us to reckon with the history of blackface as a way of dismantling its continued use and power.
When I was 10 years old, I remember one evening come across a show. It was an old movie, and it must have been White Christmas or Holiday Inn of that type, but it was a musical. And I started watching, and then they started to do this musical scene, and I noticed I saw Bing Crosby in blackface. And I was confused. I couldn't quite understand what the blackface had to do with the singing and dancing. That was my introduction to blackface minstrelsy. Blackface minstrelsy originated in New York and not the South, as a lot of people would think, in the 1830s. It was an incident where white actors would blacken their faces with burnt cork, paint on bright red lips, exaggerate the whites of their eyes, and put on a tightly coiled wig to create caricatures of African Americans on the American stage. The typical minstrel show was a parody of Black culture, song and dance and speech, interspersed with stump speeches, jokes, musical interludes, and theatrical skits. The cast included a roster of recurring characters. The interlocutor acted as the MC. You had Mr. Tambo and Mr. Bones as the end men. Then you also had characters like the clownish slave Jim Crow, which was also the name of the Jim Crow laws that we knew in the American South, or the maternal mammy, a hypersexualized wench, an arrogant dandy Zip Coon, and the lazy childish Sambo. The caricatures were often brutal, but not to the white audiences who laughed at the antics of the illiterate slaves as they sat secure in their own superiority. The image of the dancing, simple-minded buffoons captured the public's imagination and spread across the country like wildfire. And Mark Twain spoke highly of the American minstrel show, applauding the characterizations and the source of its humor. But just as it entertained, it also dehumanized the subjects of its ridicule, leaving the abolitionist Frederick Douglass to describe blackface minstrels as, quote, the filthy scum of white society who have stolen from us a complexion denied them by nature. Ironically, after the Civil War, African Americans forged their own careers on the professional stage. The route to success often meant appropriating the mask that was used to mock them. White audiences also embraced Black performance in their local communities. These amateur minstrels used instructional guides that provided them with jokes, routines, songs, and costumes they needed to put on their own shows. Such was the habit of politicians, fraternal orders, colleges, high schools, and community performances who carried on this tradition well into the 20th century. The professional minstrel show left an indelible imprint on the American psyche. The images and racial stereotypes that continued to circulate in American society on sheet music, magazines, books, vaudeville, theater, film, television, radio, records, and all kinds of formats. These stereotypes were a powerful reinforcement of the ideas of white supremacy and Black inferiority. The legacy of blackface minstrelsy continues to haunt us. In a survey conducted by the Pew Research Center, they found that 1 in 3 Americans say that blackface is always or sometimes okay if it's used in a Halloween costume. So let me ask this question. What is the appeal of darkening one's skin in order to impersonate someone of a different race? Blackface minstrelsy was born out of the realities of slavery and racial segregation, and its continual reappearance echoes the pain and suffering felt by Black people whose bodies and cultures were presented as strange and grotesque. It is a persistent reminder of the racism and prejudices that bred its very existence. The way it infiltrated society is a clear example of how deeply ingrained racism is in this country. And the racial subjugation embodied by Blackface minstrelsy and perpetuated through a continuum of its history is a form of aggression, a psychic wound that refuses to heal. Racial impersonation of any form cannot escape this legacy. So it's time to shift the power of representation, to develop more expansive narratives about the rich complexity of who we are as human beings. Acknowledging and recognizing Blackface for what it is and what it symbolizes is a step in the right direction. Educating ourselves on how stereotypes reinforce racist ideologies is another. Success, in either case, depends on an honest self-assessment of our social and cultural biases and how they came to be. The legacy of Blackface minstrelsy is our shared history and requires all of us to take collective responsibility in dismantling its power to oppress and humiliate. The next time you're confronted with someone in blackface or see a racist stereotype, tell me, what will you do?
The TEDx talk you just listened to was recorded at a TEDx event in Washington, D.C. All TEDx events are independently organized by volunteers who believe in TED's mission of ideas worth spreading. Special thanks to the organizing team at TEDxMidatlantic. Want to listen to more TEDx talks? Visit our website at ted.com/TEDxShorts. I'm Atossa Leoni. Thanks for listening, and see you tomorrow.